Everybody, hello, hi. My name is Dornumdu. I am the host of Gather to Grow. I'm here with Food for Mzansi. So the topic this evening is the most spoken about topics when it comes to, agriculture, accessing land, how to access land, where to access land. I'm really excited to hear from our experts who will be joining us shortly. I'm going to allow my guests to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with the beautiful Tandeka. Tell us about you. Tell us about your agricultural journey a bit. Just more about you. Thanks.
I'm Tandega, based in Durban. I am an emerging farmer. I focus mostly on production, but I've just ventured into livestock as well. The farming journey is quite hectic, that's what I'm going to say, but I enjoy every bit of it. Just recently did my honors in GIS and remote sensing, as I am interested now in the precision agricultural side of it, where I just want to focus on doing drones and etc.
Oh, wow, that's absolutely amazing. I love that. I should invite you to my talk on tech in agriculture because I think you'd be able to contribute to that one as well. So that's absolutely amazing. Mampuru, do you want to tell us more about you, what you do within agriculture? It's always difficult, like Tanteka said, but what do you enjoy most about being in the sector?
Except for the long days and the long nights. I just love interacting with the animals. Basically, farm in Polokwane, Limpopo, and predominantly we do livestock and crops. But personally, my passion lies with livestock. So I love livestock. We do both. We do cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs. Besides that, I'm also an agri contractor.
For me, it's always so interesting. My guests never just do one thing. It's always this, that. It's always like, they're always busy with lots of things. But I guess that's how it is in the sector. You're super dynamic in that way. Let me just check where Craig is and also just kind of update everyone on the topic for those that might be coming through or may came through later. So we want to try and kind of understand how to lease farming land in South Africa because, many farmers may just start out, they might not actually understand how to go about it. So hopefully to give some kind of guide to kind of navigate this integrated process, understanding the legal landscape, connecting with landowners, mastering the financial aspects, because there's various avenues that you need to kind of focus on or understand, and not just about, taking the best thing available as well. Khomoto saying, wow, precision farming is amazing. I've got experience for installing systems on tractors, GPs for geo-mapping. Thanks, Khomoto. So I'm sure you and Tandeka can talk about that. This is also what I love about these sessions. You never know who you're going to meet, and it's always great to connect. So please do follow each other. Go crazy with that aspect of this whole session as well. In the meantime, I'm going to ask my farmers that are here to just kind of talk through how they personally went about accessing their land as a start and what they looked at from like the first point. Manfred, maybe you can start.
How we got access to land, actually answering one of your questions down there, but we actually got it unconventionally. We got it through word of mouth. Basically, we met different people at different locations. Perhaps one of them was at an auction. They told us about this particular farm, which is where we are now, and we approached the community or the family that's running that farm, and we gave them an offer, and we negotiated, and we started on a 1-year contract lease. Fast forward 11 years later, we are on a long-term 10-year lease. It's renewed every 10 years. Yes, we've been on the farm till now, and we're producing livestock on the farm.
Thanks for that. Tandeka, how did you access your land?
I first started with the Department of Agriculture. This was so I ended up driving around farms and finding a vacant farm, and then I approached the owner. From there, we started leasing. But we have two plots. One we and the other we more due to ads and stuff, so it's on hold. We're currently leasing another.
Perfect, great. That's amazing. Yeah, I actually didn't think to ask whether you guys own or lease your land. Even before I invited you, I was like, yeah, willing to speak on that. That's great. Awesome. Thanks, Craig. Welcome. I was just asking both Tandeka and Mampuro just to tell us how they went about accessing their land. And then maybe for you as a first question, just to give an introduction on what you do within the sector, specifically your work with AgriSA.
Yeah, I'm head of rural development at CSI, as well as advisory services at Agri Enterprises. We're owned by Agri South Africa. We work with farmers. Fundamentally, we're an enterprise support organization, it's an ESO. We support enterprises and we support farmers. We run a couple programs where there's farmers involved, and we channel funding to farmers as well. One of the things we have to do is assist farmers in getting land or renewing leases, or farmers want to move. We've also learned a thing or two, so happy to share what we've learned. We're not like a law agency or anything, but really happy to share practical experience, tips and tricks, and pitfalls to avoid that we've learned.
Thanks, Craig. And now I'm going to go back to Mampuru with my first question. What are the legal requirements and, kind of regulations one must consider when entering into a farming land lease agreement? What did you look at specifically when it comes to you leasing your land?
To answer your first question prior to that, Dawn, yes, we both own and lease land. But in terms of what to look for, we basically paid attention to, firstly, the duration as to how long the landowners are willing to give us the land for. Secondly, as well, the rate, what rate is the landowners willing to charge us as tenants? And as well, what rules do the landowners have in place in terms of maintenance, how many animals we can keep on the farm, how many workers we can keep on the farm, and so forth. And as well, most important one for me is as well the steps to be taken. Either one of the parties does not comply. For instance, the owner, the property does the tenant wrong, or the tenant does the owner of the property wrong by perhaps not paying rent, which may lead to possible eviction.
Thanks for that. Yeah, you kind of have to understand how we're going to end this relationship before we even start it, right?
That's correct.
If we break up, what's going to happen? Let's all just be on the same page. Yeah. Craig, is that also in your experience with the farmers that you work with in the programs that you guys run? That's kind of the framework of what you look at?
Contract law comes into play really quickly. So if it's not in the document, we say it's often what's not in the document that'll catch you rather than what's in the document. So that lease agreement, make sure everything's in there. Anything that you want, anything to cover you. I mean, great about the number of farm workers. Duration is an important one. Assets, if you do improvements to the land, who do they belong to? If you put up shade nets, if you put up a borehole, who does it belong to? What happens if you want to move it? What happens if your lease runs out and they say, no, this must stay behind? You must think about what happens if we break up before you actually start the relationship.
Tandeka, what was your experience when you kind of went into your agreement? And then maybe I can also ask you for some insight in terms of the duration of kind of an agreement. Is there like a standard, 5-year is like the minimum? Is that something that you kind of think about? Because, it's a long game when it comes to farming. It's not just like a 1-year, 2-year thing. What did you look at in terms of your contracts and agreements?
Okay, first of all, what we did is we basically had a lease agreement which was written between the owner and myself. And then after that, we basically stated like the duration, the terms and conditions. And then most important thing is looking at things such as like your water usage as well. Most farmers just go into leasing and they don't incorporate those things. It's very important, like when you actually lease a farm, you look at those things because they come into biting you later on if you don't pay attention to it. And in terms of duration, I think it depends with the farm owner. It depends. I know in most cases, it's actually from 5 years going on to 10 years. I know Department of Agriculture, when they advertise their leases, they usually state 10 years. Basically, it starts from 5 years. It could be less than that. As I said, it depends on the owner, your agreement with the farm owner.
And then, Craig, is there any aspects that, the duration can also aid you with, like funding, for example? Should that be something that you really kind of think about when you're entering into agreement to rather get a longer term lease than a shorter term lease in your experience?
Yeah, you'd always rather go for as long a lease as possible. And sometimes what you can do, a nice trick is you'll enter into a longer lease, say 10, 15 years, with the option to review the lease or renew it, say every 5 years. So to say, we'll check in and see if the relationship's still working. And if it is, we carry on. So then it sometimes gives the landlord a bit more comfort. But otherwise, you'd actually just like to say, I want as long as possible. What's the maximum you can do? Can we start with 10? Raising funding, the challenge is still that you don't own the land. So generally, funding is security-based. So you need some assets. Are there some tractors? Are there some sheds? Are there some boreholes that you can put up as security? If something goes wrong, the bank's going to come knocking for those. Your car, your house are next in line generally. Otherwise, you can do value chain financing. So to say, I am planting the crops, the revenue from the crops are 1.2 million Rand, so I want a 600,000 Rand loan. From that loan, I'm going to pay my rent, plus I'm going to pay for the input for the crops. So you still have the challenge there. There's something interesting with communal land. It happens quite a lot. You're not allowed legally to have a lease longer than 10 years. It's 9 years, 11 months specifically for communal land. It's a very small technicality and not many people know it. So when you go to the bank with a 30-year PTO, it's not valid.
That's actually one thing that I wanted to ask about later, because with my one lease agreement, I also heard someone say 9 years. Is it 9 years, 11 months? Is that what you're talking about?
9 years, 11 months on traditional land. So
Okay.
government can write you longer leases. Private landlords can write you longer leases. Traditional authorities and Inkosi, Amakosi, they cannot write you longer leases.
Okay, thank you for that insight, Craig. I would just like to know, like, how does one actually go about identifying? How does prospective farmers actually go about like identifying and connecting with landowners, interested in leasing the agricultural land in South Africa? So I've heard of like, especially like, newly commercialized farmers, they might want to expand and maybe they expand to the neighboring farm, or neighbors kind of share with each other in that way. Does that happen generally? What is your experience with it, Mamburu?
Yes, it does happen actually, Dawn. It actually happened with us where one of the tenants on the farm that we're renting, they decided to move out and sell all the animals. We approached the owners and we took over all the land that belonged to previous tenant. As well, that also meant that we negotiated a longer term lease because we have more land. So that allowed us also apply for funding and as well improve the land even more because we have more access to it. Personally, that has occurred with us.
Is there like a directory? Do farmers just speak to each other on the social media platforms? How does one go about it? Do you just email people directly? Tandeka, you mentioned like driving to farms, like literally just going there saying, "Hey, I'm a new farmer. Can you give me some land?" Like how does one do it?
So basically, it's more of, I saw that the procedure was quite long in terms of working with the Department of Agriculture. So what I do is I would visit Property 24 and I'd look at like farms that are available for leasing. And another thing is it's very important to look at like magazines as well, such as like your Farmers Weekly magazine. They also state like farms that are actually available for leasing. And then after that, maybe I'll just drive around and I'll notice like a vacant farm and then I'll just get information, ask about it, all of that. So yeah, that's what I've done personally. Yeah. And down in terms of like the agent working.
So there was someone that you specifically worked with to be able to liaise through to get to the farmer, or was it direct with the farmer?
It's mostly direct. It's only when I was desperate for a farm. I needed a farm, and
Yeah.
that was the for it because I just had came back from Mpumalanga, got our production. So we drove around asking for land and stuff. So yeah, that's how we worked on it.
Luando's saying, and Eastern Cape is having most sale of farms. Hiking Uncharted also saying lately on Farmers Weekly they're just showing farms up for auction, haven't seen leasing land. Craig, what are the other platforms and spaces that you know about that actually advertises leased land? Do you know of anything?
Look, farmers have got to do the work generally. There's three platforms that farmers can find farms, or three mechanisms. So it's private. So you and they all revolve around identifying the land first. You should know the land that you want to rent. So private land, you know it, and then you approach the landlord. That can be Property 24, private property, platforms, websites like that, or you just approach them directly, or it's a neighbor's farm or something like that. State land, government land, Dallard in this case, Department Agri, Land Reform and Rural Development. They are the landlord. They've got a link. You can just apply on their website. I can share the link here as well. You apply. But you need to know the portion, the parent farm name, portion number, and extent and stuff like that. You can find that out for free. There's an awesome website. It's called ArcGIS, ARCGIS. You can just have a look there and click on the farm, see who owns it, the extent, the portion, hectares, and have a look. And so it's free. You just need data. Today's data is not that expensive, but the farmer needs to do some work. And the third is then customary land or communal land. But again, you need to have identified the land itself. There isn't like a directory you can scroll through and say, I want this farm, unless it's on like a private placement, like on private property or Property 24.
So what I'm hearing is a lot of research as a start. And then again, when it comes to kind of knowing and understanding what's actually on the land, do you get an agronomist to come? Who comes and checks this property with you? Someone was just asking to repeat the information. Okay, Craig, maybe you can pop those links in the comment section for people to kind of review that as well. But who do you kind of take along with you to assess the land, and what do you look for? I think Tandeka mentioned the water rights. That's one aspect. What else do you look at when you're kind of making that assessment? Mampuru, would you like to take that one?
I would say that personally, a farmer should have a checklist in place for of the minimum things that they look for that will fit their needs and the types of land that they want. But before that, I think a farmer should be an agronomist, what you call a grass specialist or crop specialist, all in one. But they should not want. Basically, they must look at the field types, if they are like a farmer, the level, the quality of fencing, the amount of water, as Tandek and Craig mentioned, as well as if any water rights present. And as well, most importantly, the amount of rainfall in the area. So if you're going to put crops or animals that are very intensive and need a lot of water, I think you need to consider that looking at the weather patterns area is also important. And also, perhaps you're also going to be a soil as a farmer. You're going to need to know the different types which occur in the specific area that you're looking for. So you need to know the soil types that occur in the area you're looking for in order to make a concise decision.
Thanks so much. I think that checklist is almost vital when it comes to kind of making that assessment. Tandeka, is there anything that Mampuru left out that you looked at, focusing on your specific commodity in terms of accessing and leasing your specific land?
If you can't afford all these specialists, especially if you're going and planting, you can do that yourself. Like take different hectares, you subdivide hectares, and then you can do that yourself. I do it myself. So yeah, I think you actually learn how to do certain things before you leave.
Craig, anything in your experience? I think the weather pattern thing is something that I actually made a note of myself. Is that something that you can ask the previous owner or like neighboring farmers as well? Yeah, do you, I guess you can kind of make that part of the exercise as well, speaking to the neighboring farmers or the previous person who leased the land before you. There should be some kind of data on that, record keeping from that farm, hopefully, before you. Craig, what has your experience been like working with farmers? Thanks.
Yeah. Be ready to spend some time. So Google's your friend. Google will tell you how much annual precipitation, rain, when roughly, you'll get 70 mils this month, 100 mils that month. But what happens when it doesn't happen? That's what the farmers' neighbors will know. They'll know it's susceptible to hail. Hail's a big one. Frost is a big one. And when were the last droughts? We're going into the season of El Nino now. So we're expecting lower annual rainfall for the next 4 years, starting this year. 24 till 28, whatever the annual rainfall was, discounted by 100 mils at least, maybe more. So then the water and water use license gets really important.
Hiking Uncharted also saying knowing whether the land is irrigated or not. I think that's a very important aspect as well, especially for crop farming. Thank you so much for that comment. That's actually a really important one. What is my next question? I'm just looking at my notes quickly. Yeah, also just I think I spoke about whether the land actually meets your specific needs. And also just not saying yes to it because it looks attractive now. Also, is there a time period? So like you don't make your decision now, you give it like its space. Because I think often you're eager and I mean 5 years is a long time to go into an agreement. And if you're not happy halfway through, I mean the breakup agreement should be there. Um, but how long can you kind of take to actually make your decision if you're leaning strongly towards something that feels right now? How long did it take you both, Mampuru and Tandeka, to kind of make your final decision after doing all the initial research, going and doing all the checks, all of that? How much time should actually be spent before you make the decision?
Thank you, Don. But with me personally, it was love at first sight, so it didn't take long. Within a week, we were done with everything. But I would say anything between 7 and 14 days. But remember, Dawn, and that isn't this like a first come, first serve. The longer you take, Craig may come in and take the property away from me. That took that. So, but then be careful not to be too hasty. You end up making a regrettable decision. But I would say anything 7 and 14 days, but be cognizant of the fact Craig or Tanya may be after the same property that you are.
Yeah, also that's I love that you had that love at first sight thing. Farm buildings, I actually forgot to ask about that. So accommodation for you yourself on the farm. Should you also think about that? And if you have to build something, do you build something like semi-permanent? You just put up like a structure that you can break down again if you're going to be obviously trying to live on the farm as well, not just operate from there. Tandeka, how long did it take you to make your final decision?
I think it took about a month to decide because we just want to see if it will work, all of that, and then basically the research as well. And it was more of drafting paperwork with lawyers, all of that. So yeah.
So there was a lot of admin around it, and that should obviously never be overlooked. Thanks, Craig, for sharing this information. I'll also try and post it in the comment section when I post this session. And then also to remember that all of this information will be available on Food from Zanzi's YouTube channel as well. Hiking Uncharted asking when you're leading is it monthly payments as per residential lease? How does it work?
Generally,
Yeah, that's the
you
other
can
aspect.
negotiate.
I think it's more of negotiation as big as like if you're looking into, let's say I'm planting potatoes, so the only time I would harvest my potatoes is after 3 months. So if you make an agreement with the landowner, you can actually state that, can I pay when I harvest? But according to the certain months that you have missed. So there is like some sort of like relationship that you guys build, And from there, you need to be transparent about everything and honest in terms of like your payments and making sure that you pay accordingly.
Thanks, Craig. You were also wanting to comment on that one?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It's a negotiation. Ask for what you want. So if you don't want to pay monthly, then say, here's why I don't want to, here's why it doesn't make sense for me. And yeah, state your case. And remember, there's lots of land that's not for free. It's up for grabs in the country at the moment. There's lots of land you can lease. One thing that's important is beyond the business plan, beyond financing, like know what you want to do. It's been an awesome case where we do have two tenants here, two lessees here as well that have gone through it personally. But a plan is important. So you need to know, you need to have your business finance in place, your business plan in place. Not even a formal document, just know what are you going to do? How are you going to raise what you're going to need for it? There's something with assets. It was mentioned earlier. To rule of thumb, fixed assets stay on the farm after you leave. Movable assets come with you.
Nompe just saying also your advised one should put down a huge lump sum of the amount of land you're going to use for planting. Advised one should put on a huge lump sum of the amount. I'm not sure I'm understanding. So kind of to put down funds before. Does that happen? I'm not sure. Have you experienced any of that, Craig, in your work with farmers?
Yeah, so when you're planting and when you're in production, you're going to have a lot of your expenses up front. So there's a really cool rule of thumb, and it works both ways. If you're a tenant, your lease should not be more than 10% of your forecast revenue. So keep your total lease cost for the year under 10% of revenue. Bearing in mind, your landlord wants to recover 1% of the property's value every month in rent from you. So 12% of the property's value every year. So there's some balance between the landlord wanting 12% of value of the land every year back in rental and you wanting to pay maximum 10% of your revenue as a lease fee every year. If you find the equilibrium, it works. So try push it all the way down to single digits, 2, 3, 4% of your revenue is your lease fee. Then you're earning value for money. That's a good metric to use as well. But delay as many payments until after you harvest as possible. So try and spread your payments. So if they can allow you to maybe pay your lease in three, 4 portions, go for that. Same with your production loans or your input money. If you have to borrow it, try to break it up. Don't pay it all at once. You never know what's going to happen.
Thanks for that, Craig. I think we're definitely going to try and do a more in-depth, information session or actually an article, Farmers Inside Track article for this specific topic. Hiking Uncharted also just asking, is shade net or greenhouse considered movable or fixed? Just considering what you were mentioning, Craig.
Shaden, so this is IFRS now, and I'm not an accountant. So when you go to accounting, what things get complex. But basically, anything above the ground is for you. Anything below the ground is for the landlord. So if you dig concrete foundations for your shade nets, they stay behind after you. But if you just lay them on top of the ground, maybe with like tent pegs, and you just make movable shade nets, then you take them.
And that all needs to be written down in the contract as well, or is that just a standard, in terms of legal-wise?
It is standard, but don't take a chance. Like I said in the beginning, it's more of what's not in the contract that'll catch you rather than what's in the contract. So if you know you want to do vegetables, you know you want to do cabbage, spinach, anything that needs a bit of shade, say in there, I intend to put up shade nets, and if when the lease ends, I will take them with me.
Okay, great. Okay, so my next question would just be around, government programs or incentives that support individuals or entities looking to lease farming land in South Africa. What are the eligibility criteria for these programs? Thandeka, I think you spoke about applying to government. You went through that process as well. Maybe I can start with you and just talk about your experience on that, please.
So it was more of the department advertising the land, and then I applied for it, and then I got called to come and view the farm. I noticed that it was also virgin land, so the procedure was just too long, and they expected me to do the proposal within a week. So it was impossible for a 900 hectare to write a business proposal. It was impossible for me to write a business proposal for a 900 hectare within a week. So I just let it go. But I was called for it to come and view the farm. And the procedures, it was quite long because it didn't have fence. There was literally nothing. It was just virgin land. So yeah, there are agencies which are there, especially like in terms of your Department of Agriculture. I follow them even on Instagram. They do post like leases there and there. Farmers like your magazines, they do post, and also interacting with different farmers, you will know like what's out there as well. And also it's very important, like you need to know where you want to be based, like in terms of like your farm. If you want to eventually locate to more riverside, you need to know what's happening that side so that it's safer for you in order to actually access land and to get information, specifically for agricultural purposes.
Thanks, Adeka. Craig, your experience with programs that you're aware of, and also specifically the criteria. I know that it's sometimes clearly stated on the applications as well, so you have to have some kind of experience. There is certain requirements when it comes to applying for certain visas. But like for someone totally new, what should they kind of build towards to be able to apply in a year's time or 2 years' time, if they're starting? And I'm talking about really like backyard, going up, slowly moving into the industry, if we can just kind of make it as simple as that.
Fortunately, if you want to lease any land from government, the barriers to entry are very, very few. It's actually really simple. So I'm just going to read some of these eligibility criteria. It's things like applicants must be from previously disadvantaged South Africans. They must be natural or juristic persons. They must be above 18 years old. Priority within the target group shall be given to women, youth, and persons with disabilities. Not to say men can't lease from government, but priority is given when there's multiple applicants for the same piece of land. There's other priority conditions as well. And then they go into where they start screening you. So public servants, former public servants, and traditional leaders, they vet you very closely because you're I think it's called a PEP, politically exposed person. So the basis is you must have a South African ID, essentially. That's it, and have all your registrations in place. There was a cool program, I think it still exists, the Proactive Land Acquisition Strategy that was run by Dallard. And I think if you follow the link, if you look for Plus Farms, that actually gives a whole list of farms that are currently available. It's like 80 farms. And you can just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. So if you're in Vembe, like there's a couple in Vembe there as well right now.
And then maybe this is just the other question. If I'm based in the Western Cape and I want to move to a different province, just because there's more, land in that province, is that something that you should you just like make that move, relocate completely, even though you're not too familiar with everything else? I guess it's just more research, right? It just means you have to be more aware of what's happening if you didn't grow up in a specific space or place. Is it more difficult for you to adapt or adjust to that kind of environment and dealing with farming practice there if you're not used to it? Does it make your life more difficult? I think it should. I don't know.
Try to stay within your ecosystems of support as much as possible. So don't separate yourself from your family to go and follow a venture. Like don't leave your partner behind. Like those kind of things. Don't go chasing a dream for 5 years and come back and say, it didn't work, but your friends are like, who are you? I haven't seen you for years. There's a lot of land around you. You'd be surprised. I mean, we've got, 124 million hectares of country, 12 million of which are arable. So there's a lot of land in the country, and people need 10, 100 hectares to do quite a lot with. So you'd be surprised how much land is around you. You don't have to idolize this land in Vembe and in Toyando.
Mampuru, maybe I can ask you about, negotiating, fairly with farmers for something that's kind of mutually beneficial in terms of both the landowner and the farmer kind of, both benefiting in terms of having their interests or concerns met. How would you kind of go about that? And especially if it's a new relationship, what did you do in terms of your experience?
Okay, in terms of our experience, Dawn, in terms of the land that we're renting, it's a land restitution farm. So it's by a family, a specific family. But the unique thing about this one, Dawn, is that but the more you have, the more respect you'll get. So in order to have a good platform for negotiation, you have to come with a specific amount of funds or a gift to the owner. Then once you come there, the owner will see, okay, this man has an open mind. He's quite, um, um, how do I put it? He's quite equipped. So once you appease the owner, then the onus is set for negotiation. And as well, you'll be able to negotiate a longer term lease and everything you need to protect yourself against both in case anything goes wrong. But yeah, that's actually what we did. We came there and we did that. And the owners were capable, open to negotiate with. But I think whether you're doing it the customary way or the private way, I think it's important for you to state your beforehand when you meet with the owner, and then the owner will either be willing to negotiate or not. And most importantly, the tenant must be willing to compromise. You can't get everything that you want. Be willing to get something or do something. So yeah, I think hopefully I've answered you there, Tom.
Yeah, no, definitely. It sounds like you've just had a beautiful relationship with all of these processes. I'm just like, hey, I need to get into my pure state of mind and being to be able to kind of take that same road. But it sounds really great. So there's really, kind of understanding that you're going into this with a clear mind and understanding that you want to benefit both of you. Nadeka, did you have kind of same experience? Because sometimes I heard like horror stories, but you two seem to be kind of good with that with what you've been through.
It's basically very important, like to create a relationship with whoever that you're working with. It doesn't matter if you using their land or whatsoever, but creating a good relationship with someone is very important.
Craig, maybe you can talk about, kind of the risk management, and legal mechanisms, that should be included in any farming lease agreement to kind of protect both parties, when it comes to the leasee and the landowner. If you could just kind of, if there's a specific list, if there's something that you speak to, I think we've gone over a lot of these aspects already. Just as we start wrapping up, to kind of go over that again. Thanks.
Well, it's a simple thing for me, but I see it not happen so often. Get that lease agreement signed by both parties and initialed on every page. It's a really small thing, but if you change something on that lease document and the landlord does not initial next to that change, it doesn't count. So I mentioned here now that like if you're going to install fixed assets like a borehole, you can then negotiate to say, well, the borehole value is 70,000 Rand. I want to see a reduction I want to recoup that. I want to get 70,000 Rands worth of reduction over the period. So please give me 1,000 Rand a month discount over 6 years or something. And if you put that in and you initial next to it and the landlord doesn't, and say after 2 years you decide, okay, I'm done. You now owe me 40K for the borehole. The landlord says, I never agreed to this. And you take it to court and they rule in the landlord's favor. You're out of pocket. And yeah, just everything in that lease agreement. Put everything you can think of in that lease agreement. It's a negotiation. Once they give you that contract, it's not final until you're both in agreement. South Africa likes documentation. Our legal system likes documentation. There's nothing specific that should or shouldn't be in there. Just put it in there.
And then who do you get? I mean, thanks for that comment, because I think Hiking Uncharted was saying stay away from boreholes, but now we've kind of answered that question that there is a way around that as well. So thanks for that. Just checking if there's any other questions. We are nearing the end of the conversation. Are there any aspects that I may have missed in my questions that you guys think is important to kind of highlight? Maybe from your side, Craig, if you have anything. And then also in terms of, financial considerations, what should be kind of examined before committing, and how can one kind of set up a realistic budget for a venture, keeping all of this in mind. But I think you went over that before as well. But any other aspects that we can focus on? Thanks.
Yeah, sure, Don. So one thing to keep in mind is try keep your lease fee below 10% of your total revenue. So you're going to do R1 million a year. You cannot pay more than 100,000 Rand for your lease fee. It's a good rule of thumb. You'll keep within your budget. I think one other thing, which is just an interesting fact, if we do something on communal land, I'd love to chat about communal land. We've worked with like 200 traditional leaders in the country. We know Amakosi and traditional authority systems quite well. Something new that's happening is you do have to pay the traditional authority either a lease fee or pay them a once-off fee for processing your application. And then when you receive the lease agreement, that's when you pay. However, what's starting to happen now is indunas are starting to charge administration fees. And it's not a small nyana 2,000 Rand, 3,000 Rand. I have seen some exorbitant administration fees, like 200K plus. That doesn't even guarantee you will get your lease agreements. They just want that 200K. You might never see the induna again. So please be careful of schemes like this.
Is there a good estimate per hectare to consider as a good price, just as a baseline? That's Hiking Uncharted asking that question. Anyone can respond to this one, by the way. Should I read the question again? So Hiking Uncharted saying, is there a good estimate per hectare to consider as a good price? So what's a good price? I don't know, actually.
I don't know if this is still relevant. The government used to charge 1,000 Rand per hectare per year. I don't know if that's still the going rate, but it used to be a good benchmark. Private's obviously a lot more expensive.
Thank you. And then any last and final comments from all of you? I know that there's, a lot of things that we could have probably gone into more detail with, but this is just a baseline to understand the gist of it. And we've heard from farmers who shared their experience. Craig also sharing a lot of his insights and experience. So thank you so much for all of your time. Maybe just last and final comments, last advice. I'm going to start with you, Mampuru.
I remember you asked one question, how can a small-scale farmer move to renting government land? I'll say it's important for the farmer to always keep records. I always tell the farmers that I work with that they must always keep records. Also be of the experience that you have, because one of the requirements that they want for leasing stake land, I think they say you must have 3 to 5 years experience, if I'm correct, Craig. But yeah, keeping records is also important. But yes, another thing, leasing land is a complex and quite eventful and what do I say? But it's an interesting thing. People really love to engage more about it, and not to blab about. But thank you, Don.
Thank you. I really enjoyed listening to all of your experiences and all of your insights. Really appreciate it. Thandeka?
When you venture into this, it's always important to do as much research as you can before you go into it, especially if you're going into the leasing agreements. Make sure that you have lawyers involved to draft down your contracts, and so that you're on the safe side. And as Craig said earlier on, write as much as you can, jot down everything that you can, even if it's the smallest thing, like inserting a tab, include that on that lease. Because when you leave, those are actually costs that are going to affect you. I remember there was a time where we were doing spinach. We were harvesting spinach for Spa. And I used to tell my team, even your elastic, you must be careful, in terms of how you just throw it away. It's actually because I've actually counted, if I'm getting 100, I need to use 100. If you're gonna lose 5 of those, you won't notice that, but it actually affects me on my pocket. So it's very important to look at those things and do as much research as you can.
Yo, that one's gonna sit with me forever. If there's 100 elastic bands, you better make sure that you wrap the 100 bunches. So, I mean, that's a very important point. Also, just last few question, Hiking Uncharted. I love that you're so active on the session. She's Hiking Uncharted asking, is informal experience considered example backward farming? And then also regarding the 3 to 5 year experience. Actually, that's a very good question. What is actually considered experience? Is just the time spent doing the thing, or does it have to be like time spent in record farming on big land, small land? What is that experience exactly? Craig, do you perhaps know this one?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's going to relate more to money. So what the landlord wants to see is that you're able to pay for the rental. So they'll want to see a loan agreement, or they'll want to see a proof of income. That'll be related to the I've been doing this for 3 years or 5 years or something. I've been backyard farming, but I've done 100K per year kind of thing. So they just want to, and I mean, Ampuru, and these are both fantastic comments as well about Pandeka, and the closing points are so correct. Like if you don't keep records, no one's going to believe you at your face value.
Thanks so much. And then just last and final comment from your side also, I'm gonna make sure that we kind of do another in-depth Farmers Inside Pack article for this one, because I think there's a lot of clear points that came through in the session that can be shared for as a resource for farmers. A last comment from you, Craig?
To your point in the beginning, think about what happens if the relationship does end. Think about breaking up before you get there. We currently have two farmers in our program that are busy getting kicked off their farms because their landlords they've taken overgrown, weed-infested, desertified land, and they've made hundreds of thousands of rands of revenue on that land. And now they're saying, I want to do the same. You must now go. I'm going to take over the farming operation. So they've canceled their leases. They're not renewing. And all because the people didn't think about what happens if this relationship breaks down. So put it in the contract and think about it.
Yeah, thank you so much for your insights, Tandeka, Mampuru, Craig. It's been great having you all with me. Thank you for all the engagement. Thank you so much. I hope that everyone enjoyed the session. I did learn so much. Thanks again to my guests. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the evening. Everything of the best with your farming journeys and everything. Tandeka just coming back. Thank you again. And be blessed until next week. Have a great evening and safe travels if you're traveling anywhere today, and have a great rest of this week. Bye-bye for now.